Hi everyone, welcome to this week's episode of No Such Thing as a Fish. Daniel Schreiber is not here this week. He has gone to a place that shares a name with something you might take to the beach with you. And if you listen to the rest of this episode, you'll be able to work that out. But anyway, the main thing is that Dan is not here this week, and so we needed someone to replace him. And who have we got? We have the most incredible guest. It is comedian Lucy Porter. You will absolutely love her on this week's podcast. And at the end, you're definitely going to want to check out all of her stuff. And that would include Fingers on Buzzers, which is a podcast she does all about quizzing with my good friend and the vixen from the TV show The Chase, Jenny Ryan. Lucy has also got a brand new stand-up show called Wake Up Call. She's taken it to the Edinburgh Fringe this year, and then she'll be touring the UK in 2023. If you want to go and see that, and I definitely recommend you do that, then go to lucyporter.co.uk and you can find out more about Lucy. Anyway, I'm certain you're going to really enjoy this podcast. We had such a good time making it. And what else is there to say apart from on with the podcast?
Hello and welcome to another episode of No Such Thing as a Fish, a weekly podcast coming to you from the QI offices in Covent Garden. My name is Andrew Hunter-Murray and I'm joined this week by James Harkin, Anna Tajinski and special guest, it's Lucy Porter. And once again we have gathered around the microphones with our 4 favourite facts from the last 7 days. And in no particular order, here we go. Starting with Lucy.
My fact is that if you were a baby born in Korea in December 2020, you could be 1, 2 or 3 years old.
So just take your pick.
Yeah, multiple choice. Just be
Nice.
whatever. I am very keen on being able to manipulate your age, as so many people in show business are. But I had never heard of this until I was watching Ultimate Beastmaster, which is my favourite of the competitive obstacle course shows. And
What?
Everyone's got to have a favourite.
Oh,
Ultimate
amazing.
Beastmaster.
Ultimate Beastmaster.
Is it like Takeshi's Castle?
It is. It's like yes, it's a big beast, and there was a Korean contestant on that, and talking about his kid, and he went, "Oh well, he's 2 in Korean age," and I was like, "What is Korean age?" And it turns out that in Korea and other parts of East Asia, there is a different numbering system for age. So the Korean system, which is when you're born, you're a year old. Right? The minute you come out, that's your first birthday, which makes sense because your first birthday is your first birthday. So then you gain another year every New Year's Day. So effectively what that means is everybody gets a year older on the same day, which I like the idea of that because I think birthdays are depressing when you wake up and you're maybe a little bit hungover, certainly a bit tired after your birthday, and you're another year older. Whereas in Korea, everybody celebrates on the same day.
But then it'd be hard to get a table in TGI Fridays, wouldn't it, if everyone had a birthday on the same day?
Yeah, the soul branch.
Also, you've literally just had to buy everyone Christmas presents, and then you have to buy an entire new raft of birthday presents.
Oh, yeah.
Well, you'd get 2 for 1, wouldn't you? I mean, it would
I suppose you can cheat it like that.
Yeah. So there's one system where you get a new birthday, a new year every New Year's Day. There's another system, which is the New Year birthday, where you are no years old when you're born. You have your first birthday after a year, and then you do the thing where you add a year on New Year's Day. Okay. Or, of course, they also use the international system where you just turn 1 year older on your actual birthday. Wow. So that means you can have 3 different birthdays.
So confusing.
Or ages, 3 different ages. But
I used to think, did anyone else used to think it was so unfair that people born in a leap year, like my granny, I remember she was born on the 29th of Feb, and I thought that meant she would live 4 times longer than the rest of us. Because we'd always say, Gamma's only 15 years old.
That's
and
so interesting.
Then I used to get so annoyed, and actually she has not lived, it turns out, 4 times longer than everyone else.
That is a shame.
That is a real shame.
Yeah. But there was a study, wasn't there, of 3, 4 and 5-year-old children asking them about, changing your age and birthdays and stuff. And quite a large percentage of them thought that when you had a birthday, that was when you got older. And so if you had like 3 birthday parties in a week, you would gain 3 years straight away.
Terrifying.
I know.
Children. These 4-year-olds.
Idiots.
Don't
They're
know
all
nothing.
idiots.
Well, because the Queen 2 birthday thing, I always was, when I was a kid, I was very jealous, as you would be, of like, why do you get 2 birthdays? Because my birthday's the end of January, which is a rubbish time.
You
So-
should get to choose when your birthday is, shouldn't you?
I know.
Well, the reason apparently the Queen has her birthday, the 2 birthdays, was it was George II who had a November birthday, and he was like, well, the weather's always miserable, so I'll move it to June or whenever it is.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but she actually has loads though, because she has the official birthday, the actual birthday, and then New Zealand, Canada, Australia.
Yeah. We mentioned once, James worked out that she's actually 79,000 years old. Based on
I think if you counted all her birthdays, she was definitely in the high hundreds,
It was
wasn't it?
669,
Was
I
it?
think,
Yeah.
birthdays.
I think this is what's happened to me, is that I've aged in dog years somehow. I've managed to...
We all consider you royalty, so I think that might have come across.
The grand old dame of... I've actually had 586 birthdays. But,
But in Korea, they even find this confusing, don't they? To the extent that they are apparently changing it, although I don't know if they will. President-elect, who I think might be president by the time this podcast goes out, President Yoon, he says he plans to abolish it, and 71% of Koreans are in favour of abolishing it because they're confused. And also when you have things like the retirement age, sometimes it's...
There was a thing with
It's a nightmare.
COVID, wasn't there, where you were getting your injections at a certain age, but they didn't say whether it was your Korean age or your international age or whatever, and so people were kind of gaming the system
That's
a little bit.
interesting.
Yeah.
Well, I suppose as well for things like if you're, on the cusp of being able to drink booze or...
Yeah.
I remember when I was young and I didn't like to lie because I'm very Catholic, guilty. So if I was asked for my age when I was trying to buy booze illegally, I would say, oh, well, I am in my 18th year.
Wow.
That's very
Even though
clever.
Does anyone
I was
ever fall for it?
No, of course not.
No.
Because I sounded like I was a Victorian. So I am in my 18th year. You're either a time traveller or
You're in your 150th year.
Well, the other thing for Koreans that is difficult is that you greet people and talk to people differently depending on their age. So you do actually need to know how old people are because that will affect how you talk to them. So if you're saying happy birthday to someone, if they're your age or younger, you say sang il chuk ha hei. If they're a little bit older than you say sang il chuk ha hei you. And if they're much older than you say sang il duk ha tu ya. I was so confident at the beginning, and then it kind of all...
Do you know that song Witch Doctor? There's a bit of that there, wasn't there?
I apologise to our Korean listeners, but that itself seems absolutely ripe with the potential for offence, because if you're someone's older than you...
Well, here you just get someone with a very insulting card, and that's how you do it.
Yeah.
You get a horrible card that you see in the shops. Racks and racks of these cards saying, you old bastard. I have no idea who's buying them. I've never bought one. I always just go for one with a dog on the front or something, but they have mean cards.
Yeah, they do.
Well, it is. Women overwhelmingly buy greetings cards, don't they? But they buy them for men to give. So apparently, it's like... I'm going to make up a statistic because why not? Like, you don't care about facts, guys, right?
No.
But like 80% of greetings cards are bought by women. So it's women buying really, cards for their husbands to give to people they really don't like.
But not back to them, to give to other members of the family or friends or whatever.
Wait, so
Because you wouldn't go to a shop if you were buying something for your husband to buy for you. You wouldn't buy dear old bastard.
I dare you to give this to me.
We may have mentioned this before, that women buy almost all the candles made on the planet. 98% of candles made in the world are bought by women.
Really?
And is it true, Lucy, that women buy horrible candles for their husbands to give people, smelling of burning tyres and stuff like that?
The last candle I bought smelled like Jeremy Clarkson's balls.
Was it meant to, or did you just give it a sniff and think, I know that?
Yeah, I was like, I recognise that smell. It was like a Madeleine moment.
There's a whole anecdote there that we need to hear.
It's like it's from his farm thing.
Gwyneth Paltrow's range has really expanded, hasn't it?
They've united. It's a natural partnership, Gwyneth Paltrow and Jeremy Clarkson.
Anyway, South Korea.
Yeah.
In 2017, they became the highest life expectancy in the world. So a girl who was going to be born, let's say, in 2025 or 2030 would expect to live to about 91, we think. Men probably around 84. Now, the reason I saw in an article that they're living so long, possibly kimchi is very good for you. You know,
fermented
good for your
foods.
fermented
Goodness me,
foods.
they're all the rage.
Another thing,
aren't
they said hypochondria. Apparently, only 35% of Koreans believe they're in good health. And so they all go to the doctors a lot, and apparently that's one reason why they live a long time. But I also thought that obviously we're adding 2 years to their age, right?
Yeah, I mean, we have no idea how old these people are. Let's be honest. They are very much,
Do you remember we did a story a couple of years ago? Doris Day found out that she was 2 years older than she thought.
Oh, yeah.
She was turning 93. And so to sort of celebrate her birthday, Ohio's Office of Vital Statistics looked into her life and stuff and uncovered some cool stuff about her. And one of the things they uncovered was that she wasn't born in 1924, as she thought she was born in 1922. So she
strange.
found out she was 95.
In Busan as well, wasn't it? Turned out she was Korean.
You can't tell how... So Doris Day couldn't have told how old she was by going in a scanner or something, because I was reading about this. It's so hard to tell how old people are based on their bones. So there are lots of arenas where it's tested, like dental scans, and the other thing is wrist bones. Apparently this is a way of measuring, but it's not very accurate, because when do you think you get your adult wrists?
I thought that I had the wrist.
I think men
now
get
that
them
I was,
about 13 or 14.
Yeah. Just in time.
I genuinely thought I had the wrist now that I was born with.
James, you're not Popeye. Because James has got quite powerful wrists, you know.
Do I?
Well, yeah.
But what I thought...
So
I
you're
mean,
born with a wrist. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, I know babies are floppy, but
The hands drop out first, and then the body comes afterwards.
Look, all of you. Basically, wrists can reach maturity, which is where the bones are fused in a particular way, as young as the age of 15. But on average, it's 17.6 years. That's the average age that wrists mature. But it completely varies. So most children do have adult wrists, as it were, before they are actually adults. So that is a bad way of telling.
Wait, so I didn't actually realise that our wrists fused differently as adults to as children. I assumed they were just the same as the rest of us and gradually grew. But do
That's
they
what I
transform into grown-up wrists?
They do. Yeah, they do. They develop more serious wristwatches. That's the way you can tell. The old Mickey Mouse watch falls off, and a new like Timex or something grows in its place. Yeah. No, just like bones fusing, like your collarbone, for example.
That's the last bit of your
it's
body.
the last bit of your body. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting.
But then also, even if you can tell that they're probably over 15 or whatever, you can't tell anything beyond that by the wrist, can you? So everyone's either under 15 to 17 or over 15 to 17, if that's how you're aging people. And also you've had to cut off their hand.
This is going to make getting into nightclubs very glorious.
Very controversial.
Put your hand in here.
Like with fish, you can tell with their ears, right? They have little otoliths in their ears.
Yeah.
And they get an extra, it's like a tree ring kind of thing, and you can count the rings. But we don't have that, is what you're saying.
That's what I'm saying. Happy Birthday.
Yeah.
The song. Because I don't know if we mentioned that it was illegal for it. It wasn't illegal for ages. It was copyrighted for ages.
Yes.
Sorry.
But people in TV shows and films would sing
Exactly.
Happy birthday to you.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is sort of how it gets sung anyway. So.
Yeah.
It was even illegal to sing it in a made-up language. I like it so much. There was an episode of Star Trek where they were going to sing a happy birthday in Klingon, and they checked it out and they thought, no, we can't do that. We'll have to pay thousands of dollars to Warner Chappell, who owned it. So they replaced it with "For He's a Jolly Good Fellow" in Klingon.
I read something the other day on Twitter, and I think it was Jason Hazley who tweeted this, but it could have been Joel Morris. But they basically said that when you sing Happy Birthday, the first note you sing is the lowest note you will ever sing.
Yes.
And that's really useful to know, because when you get to the end, it's too high, and if you started too high, then you can't reach that last note. But if you know that the first one is the lowest, you can start really low, and by the time you get to the end, you'll be able to sing it properly.
Did anyone else genuinely think that James meant it's the lowest note you'll ever sing in your life? The only way you can reach those depths is by singing Happy Birthday.
That is the note that makes people poo themselves. That's scientifically proven. It makes for very awkward birthday parties.
Stop the podcast.
Stop the podcast.
Dzień dobry, everybody, or dobro wieczór, depending on the time of day, of course.
Was that Polish?
It was indeed. I'm currently fluent in Polish because I use Babbel.com.
Interesting, because I thought you were absolutely butchering Russian, but it turns out, for all I know, you might have been butchering Polish.
I was absolutely butchering Polish, and I'm definitely not fluent, but I am getting better, and that is thanks to Babbel.
Yeah, Babbel is a really great app, and it's a website as well. And the thing is, it just really teaches you the kind of things you need to know if you want to learn a language, but also if you're just going away somewhere. It's really worth getting Babbel just to pick up the basics. And you can get 6 months free with a 6-month subscription right now if you use the promo code FISH when you go to uk.babbel.com/play.
Yep, so go to uk.babbel, that's BABBEL.com/play, and use the promo code FISH to get 6 months free with the purchase of a 6-month subscription.
And we are also sponsored this week by Squarespace.
Yes, if you have a genius idea in your brain that you want to transform into a website, then Squarespace is the place to go. It will allow you to build any website you desire, and it comes with all the tools that you would need to make it successful.
Yes, tools such as e-commerce, special member areas, all sorts of stuff like that. So if you wanted to, say, for instance, start a website where you create your own lyrics to the Baby Shark song and you want to get it to as many people as possible, then Squarespace is exactly the right place to go.
Yeah, I mean, I said you'll make it successful with Squarespace, but there are some things that are immune to success. If you do want to set up your own website, then go to squarespace.com/fish and you can get a free trial. And when you're ready to launch the site, use the offer code FISH to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain.
So go to squarespace.com/fish for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, use the offer code FISH to save 10% off your first purchase of a website, and you can really go online and make your mark. Do.
Christ alive. Okay, on with the show.
On with the podcast.
Okay, it's time for fact number 2, and that is Anna.
My fact this week is that in 2018, a new quiz show was launched on Chinese primetime TV where all the answers were about Xi Jinping.
It feels like an easy quiz, doesn't
Now
it?
the quickfire round, instant buzz.
Yeah, or if you're doing blockbusters, which X?
Well, he's lived a long time now. I think he's done quite a lot. So there's a lot of stuff to memorise there. But yeah, it managed to last for 5 full episodes of Xi Jinping-based trivia.
It wasn't cancelled. It can't have been cancelled because the ratings were low. I don't think.
Yeah, it wasn't cancelled
Were
after
the
5.
questions like, which premier from China looks nothing like Winnie the Pooh?
It was quite similar to that. Some people would say it was embarrassingly brazen. But so this was on Hunan TV, which is China's most popular TV channel for young people, and it's called Studying Xi in the New Era. And it was about understanding his thought and memorising bits of his speeches and knowing interesting facts about his life. And the questions were things like, and they all got it right. So I think...
Well, you would, wouldn't you? I mean, you would.
The ones who got it wrong.
We now move to sudden death.
I watched a quiz over Christmas, and it was a Harry Potter quiz, and it was loads of teams, and they were all massive Harry Potter nerds. No one got a single question wrong in the whole show.
Yes.
Like one person would get one question wrong, and then that would be the end because no one else would get anything wrong.
Was that hosted by Helen Mirren?
I don't recall. Yeah, maybe
I read
it was.
about it.
Yeah,
There
yeah.
was a sort of Harry Potter tournament, Hogwarts.
Because you ask young people about anything they're interested in and they know everything about
Yeah.
it. That's the
Yeah,
beauty
yeah.
of being young and having a memory, isn't it?
Yes, exactly.
You know, it's an absolutely pointless exercise. It reminds me of when Andy Osho was on Mastermind, the brilliant comedian Andy Osho, and her specialist subject was John Humphreys, who was the host at the time.
No way.
And it was
Get in his
brilliant.
head.
Yeah.
Get in his head. Is there an advantage to getting in his head? I guess so.
Well, I mean, it's a very strange place to be, his head. I mean,
Yeah.
I did Mastermind when he was the host, and we had to, you do like the banter, and it was a very strange
Really?
chat.
Was
They
it?
Really?
edited out a lot of it, yeah.
Can I ask about? I mean, we'll come back to that. Can I ask quickly about the Andy Osho thing? When he phrased the questions, did he ask about himself in the third person, or did he say, what colour are my pants?
Do you know what I can't remember actually? But
Or did he keep it professional? What colour are John Humphrey's pants?
Anyway, so Xi Jinping is, I'm sure he's very embarrassed about this program and just can't believe they made it about him, and it feels dreadful that they've had to do it. But it does feel a bit like a propaganda thing. But they there's some quite interesting facts I learned about him from it. So he knows the whole of Faustus off by heart, because one of the questions was, at the age of 15, President Xi was sent to become a farmer. During that period, he walked 15 kilometres to borrow a book. What was the name of the book?
Faustus.
Yeah.
Very strong. And
Wasn't it,
mate?
Anna, I was reading this Xi quiz was a follow-up to another ideology-based quiz, which was called Marx Got It Right.
Which had a very ambiguous take, actually, on Marx's legacy, whether
Sure.
it was good or bad.
Yeah.
We could have called it like Top Marks or something like that.
That's a
couldn't we?
much better title. The New York Times reported that contestants have nothing to lose but their chains, which is a very good...
Nice.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the winner is everyone.
Again. And forever.
With
It
no
does-
points.
Just in terms of Chinese high-stakes quizzing, the exam to be in the civil service in Imperial China was even more grueling than this TV game show. So you would take bedding, a chamber pot, ink and brushes, and spend 3 days and 2 nights in an exam centre.
Wow.
And if people died, the walls were so high that apparently nothing could get in, so that there was no possibility of cheating. And also you'd write your exam paper and then it would be transcribed by someone else, so that there was no chance of somebody seeing your
clever.
handwriting and
Wow.
recognising it. And if you died, you were just bundled up in a sack and tossed over the wall.
Is that right?
Thanks for playing, but
When you were at school, there was always a rumour, wasn't there, in your GCSEs or whatever, that if someone died in your year, then everyone would get an A? Do you remember that?
No,
Did
we
you
don't
not
have
have that in your
No,
school?
that was-
They just told us
brilliant.
if someone died, they get tossed over the wall.
yeah, that's more of an incentive, isn't it? Really, right? That's
Yeah, it was amazing, that thing, wasn't it? It changed throughout the centuries because these exams, they took place throughout all the different Chinese eras. But at one stage, they came up with an exam to do the exam. And then when you passed that exam, you would get to do the main exam. And then everyone who did that main exam then would do one final exam. So you had to do 2 exams to get to the final exam. That the emperor themselves would apparently supervise the final exam.
What, invigilate?
Yeah.
Again, that's very scary, hearing the clack, clack, clack of the Emperor's feet as he walks up and down.
no gum.
And apparently the first exam that you would do, which was the regional one, it was so big and so important that all of your family and friends would kind of sit outside because they want to know how you did, and they would set up like stalls and food stalls and stuff so that they'd be able
Corpses
to feed.
landing on their heads.
See your body parabolating towards them. Is that? Yes, it is.
On communism and quizzing, in 1975, on University Challenge, you'll probably know this, Lucy and James, about the Manchester University team, which was David Aronovich. I didn't know he did this, journalist now, of course, very famous journalist, but he was a socialist student back then, and he entered with a team. It seems to be some kind of accident, because they entered intending to take down University Challenge from the inside for its elitism, and answered sort of Trotsky, Engels, Marx, until they got told off for it.
every
and then
question.
they caved.
Yeah.
Well, yes, until Bamba Gascoigne got really pissed off.
Which of the Kardashians?
Yeah, no footage exists of it, sadly. They
No,
wiped the
you're
tapes.
kidding.
But it's a legendary University Challenge.
And it's interesting that no footage exists, because it's really the fallibility of memory, because according to David Aronovich, he just said nonsense answers. He remembers it as like he answered like Yellow Brick Road or like, Fluffy Hat.
That's what I did on University Challenge, but not intentionally.
You just got really lucky, didn't you? It was Fluffy Hat.
Challenge.
I did the sort of so-called celebrity one, which is much easier.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, everyone's like, yeah, you want to do the actual University Challenge. But yeah, no, I went to pieces completely. Me and Rob Rinder, Judge Rinder.
Really?
Just sat there looking like, oh, what are we doing? Yeah.
But Lucy, yours was a protest about the elitism of University Challenge, wasn't it, when you fell apart?
It absolutely was, yeah. One woman protest.
Yeah, well done.
Staged through the medium of looking a bit confused. But yeah, that's...
Judge Rindle, he was protesting about his wig, which he wanted a new wig.
He wanted a wig. He wanted to be allowed to wear a wig on it. Well, no footage exists of that, but there is footage readily available of the contestant on Family Fortunes, the UK version of Family Feud, who answered the same thing to every single question in the final round. So I'll ask you the question.
Yeah.
Let's see. So name a food that you would stuff.
Turkey.
Pepper.
Stuffed pepper.
I was thinking turkey was my first thought.
Well, turkey is your first thought, and that was exactly what he answered to every single question.
To every question?
Yeah.
Hang on, was the stuff one the first answer and then you just got stuck on turkey?
No.
Was the next one name a country which is in both Europe and Asia?
Imagine
What do you get if you remove the letter N from the word turnkey?
Any more?
No, I'm out.
Yeah, well, what they think happened was, they have a soundproof booth, and obviously something had gone wrong with the soundproof booth, and he had heard the guy who went first answer the question, name a food you stuff with chicken. He sort of lost his mind, basically. And he came out, and the first question was, name something you'd take to the beach. And he said turkey.
Maybe he did. Maybe him and that turkey had great days down Brighton Beach.
There's a Chinese quiz show at the moment where one of the most recent episodes, one of the people in there had to spell the word toad. And not only did they get it wrong, there were 3 judges, and they couldn't decide whether or not they'd spelled it right.
Well, there are 2 ways of spelling toad.
There are 3 ways of
spelling
spelling
Yeah.
Toad the line, toad the car, or there's
Toad in the hole.
Toad in the hole.
Yeah, this is obviously the Chinese characters dictation competition.
Oh, sorry, I was forgetting we were in China.
Yeah, we're in China. And the thing is that the word toad for the animal has 46 different individual strokes. And so if you want to do it perfectly, it's actually really, really difficult. And a lot of people make mistakes. And it was a 14-year-old contestant called Yu Shuang, and she missed out one little dot in the word toad, and 2 of the 3 judges noticed, and then she got kicked out of the final.
So it wasn't done, it's not done verbally, is it, where you have to say a straight line and then a curvy bit and then 2 dots underneath, and then it's like diagonal, incredibly boring TV show.
No, so you write it down and then the cameras can see it, but her teammates are there as well, and the camera sort of pans to them, and they're all kind of drawing it with their finger in the sky, do you know what I mean? Going, no, you need to do it this way, and do it this way, and do it this way.
Oh, God.
Really cool.
That's a really crazy format.
But yeah, spelling bee in China. Who knew?
Yeah. I didn't realize how far bees go back generally, and they evolved obviously from insects. No, not those kind of bees. Bees go back over 2 centuries, I think, in America. I was looking up the earliest mentions of them. In the late 18th century, there were references to things like quilting bees. That seems to be the earliest kind. And bee just meant a gathering of people who were doing something that was kind of useful, often for a single person. So a quilting bee would be like, this person needs a quilt, takes months to make a quilt, they're cold now, if we get together we'll get it done in one day, and you'd have a quilting bee. But the thing I like best is raising bees. They were for when a new settler came to town and wanted to live there, and I guess it was in America where lots of new people were turning up a lot. Then the raising bee was when the village would get together and build them a house. Is that great? You could just rock up and be like, do you mind having a raising bee?
Like the barn thing, because the film Witness with Harrison Ford, where he's a cop and there's a murder, an Amish murder has happened, and he's in this weird community that he doesn't know anything about, and there's a scene where they raise a barn.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It's confusing, isn't it? Because raise can mean either lift something up or burn it to the ground.
Yeah. If you get the wrong memo.
Yeah. if you missed the spelling bee last week, you turn up a bit late, burn the new barn to the ground.
Well, if you get the wrong end of the stick with spelling bee, then you could be very embarrassed because you think you've just got to spell bee, which is one of the easiest words to spell. I might have a drinking bee later if anyone's interested. Let's just apply bee to anything. I'm having a crying bee if anyone wants to join in.
When you were on Mastermind, Lucy, did you win Mastermind?
I don't like to talk about it, but I have won it twice and am the current champion of champions. But I don't like to mention it. I wish you hadn't brought it up.
Wow. What are your specialist subjects?
So I did Steve Martin
the
first time, and then Victoria Wood the second time that I did it. But I thought it'd be quite a nice thing to just sit and watch his movies for a couple of days.
Yeah.
Lovely.
Very good. Because you are a quizzer, but you're also a quizzer, I would say, because the word quizzer, the first use of it was someone who tells jokes.
Oh.
So a quizzer used to be a comedian. In 1797, according to the Oxford English Dictionary, the word quizzer meant someone who does pranks or jokes or whatever. And then obviously the word quiz is more recent than that, isn't it, for like quizzing. We think it's 20th century.
Well, for years, the legendary origin story of the word quiz was that there was an Irish theatrical impresario who wanted to attract attention, so wrote it on walls in Dublin, and everyone said, "Oh, what is quiz?" And but complete nonsense, obviously.
Yeah, that guy
It's a
was
lovely
called
story.
Richard Daly, and the anecdote, the earliest I could find, was from 1835 in the Manchester Times, but he died in 1813, so it's quite close to him dying that the anecdote was used. Quite contemporaneous, sort of, however you say that word.
Yeah, it's contemporaneous.
Yeah. I noticed, I was listening to an old episode and I realised that I don't know how to say that word, and I think I've said it quite often and I don't know how to actually
That's
say
cool.
it.
I'm going to leave it.
But Richard Daly's really interesting. He went to Trinity College in Dublin when he was 15, and he was a really turbulent student. He used to get into fights all the time. Apparently he fought 16 duels in the first 2 years that he was at university.
Christ.
And then he left Dublin to go and live in London, and we're not sure why, but one of the rumours was that he killed a billiard table marker in a duel, and he had to leave and go to London.
A billiard table marker. That's a person, not a thing.
Well, it could be a misprint for maker, but all of the sources say marker, so it could be someone who draws the lines on a billiard table.
All the old crafts are dying out, aren't they? Wow.
But yeah, and then he went to prison after he was doing a show, and he got in a fight with an audience member. And when he was in prison, he wrote a lurid account of an affair with one of his singers who was called Elizabeth Billington. And she was amazing. She was... basically, of all the English singers who have ever gone to Italy, up to the current day, she had the best reputation as best singer from England ever in Italy.
Okay, until she shagged this guy. No.
Well, she was sometimes known as the Poland Street Man-Trap. Because she had affairs with the Duke of Rutland, the Prince of Wales, the Duke of Sussex, this person. That's
Wait, and
absolutely
this
huge.
was the woman, to trace it back, who shagged the guy who apparently did, but actually didn't write the word quiz about town.
That's why we're talking about her.
Clearing things up for the listeners.
Well, I'm delighted to have heard of her.
Yeah,
I want to hear her version of Happy Birthday for a start. I think she probably would have done that. The Poland Street Man Trap.
yeah.
That's a great
That's
name.
I'm going to go and hang around Poland Street now. It's not far. And
Try and co-opt that
the
nickname.
Poland Street Man Repellent. That's what I want to be.
Okay, it's time for fact number 3, and that is my fact. My fact is that in 1804, William Wordsworth and his sister Dorothy built a hut lined with moss.
Thanks, Andy.
Just,
Lucy, you're familiar with Andy's moss obsession that we're trying to tramp down, right?
Tramp it down.
We're trampling it down.
Tramp
We're trampling
down
it.
the
the Mossman cometh. I should say this was sent in to me by a guy called Nick Hodder on Twitter. So thank you, Nick, for the moss fact. People now send me moss content every week. It's great. So he and Dorothy, his sister, they visited Scotland in the year before, 1803, and they saw this hut, a wooden hut lined with fog, which is what they called moss at the time. So they were very taken with it, and when they got home to the Lake District, they built their own hut, lined it with moss, covered it with heather on the outside, and it was destroyed, very sadly, this important bit of English literary heritage, by the later owner Thomas de Quincey.
Oh, really?
I know. Opium fan and fellow word celeb Thomas de Quincey.
He probably
destroyed
smoked it. Can you smoke moss? Is that
That's
a
right.
thing?
You're right. Probably rolled the whole thing
You'd
up.
give it a go, wouldn't
Confessions
you?
of a moss smoker.
Anyway, so the good news is that in 2020, 200 years after this absolute travesty, a new version has been built.
Isn't it interesting that the word fog in Scotland means moss?
Yes, it is weird.
Yeah, it's weird, that, isn't it?
Yeah.
Apparently, it used to be a word for grass, like long grass, and then it became moss because it's like unkempt ground. And they both come from an old Scandinavian word meaning wind blown. So you would kind of get fog blowing over the hills, and you would also get the wind blown grass. And it comes from an old Norwegian word, fucker. which meant sea mist or light drizzle.
If you trace any etymology back far enough, eventually you can find a swear word somewhere.
That's so great. Oh, weather forecast must have been so much fun. It's going to be an absolute fucker coming in from the north.
So Wordsworth and Dorothy, they were tight, weren't they?
They were super tight.
They were super tight. The brother and sister, obviously,
Yep.
but they didn't grow up together, or they grew up in the first bit of their childhood together, and then both of their parents died, very sadly, and they were separated. And William went to school, and Dorothy was sent elsewhere, and they reunited in adulthood, and they seem to have been full-on soulmates. And there are even things like the night before Wordsworth's wedding to Mary, who was his childhood sweetheart, who I actually think was a friend of Dorothy's. The night before his wedding,
So you're not implying anything with that. Anyway, sorry. So he married Mary.
he married Mary the night before his wedding. Dorothy, his sister, wore the wedding ring in bed that he was going to give to Mary. And then in the morning, William and Dorothy did this ritual where Wordsworth sort of knelt beside her and took the ring off her finger and replaced it onto her finger again. So it was a sort of ceremonial marriage to his sister. And then went and married Mary.
Blimey.
Wowzers.
And she didn't go to the wedding. Dorothy, his sister.
Did
she
she
just
not?
no, she didn't attend. It was a
What? Do we
very-
know why? Was it a wasn't invited, venue not big enough kind of thing?
You have to draw a line somewhere with a wedding, don't you? And it's like...
I think she just was grieving terribly that this was happening and that this big, emotional change was happening in her life. I mean, who knows? But she did have a diary, which he read, by the way. Another aspect of their relationship. But when she heard the wedding had happened, there were people coming up the driveway to inform her, oh yes, they're married now. She wrote, I could stand it no longer and threw myself on the bed, neither hearing nor seeing anything.
Wow.
And then she lived with them for the rest of their lives. She outlived William, then she died, then eventuallyAry, his wife.
So
died.
when William died, were the two women living together?
Yeah.
There's a sitcom.
Sitcom
Yeah.
indeed, isn't it? That's awkward, isn't it?
Absolutely.
So I can have the ring back now.
Get Dent and Maggie Smith in that sitcom.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
That'd be great.
It would be
It is
like,
a
do you
very-
remember Death Becomes Her, that movie? With the
Yes,
two...
with Goldie Hawn kind of gradually disintegrating.
Yeah, there's like two people who live together, but they're immortal.
Yeah.
And they hate each other and they start trying to beat each other up. But because they're immortal, they just, all their bones break and their wrists get all floppy. And,
It's not their wrists. They're adult wrists.
Well, on the subject of the diary and stuff, though, but they sort of had joint journals, didn't they? And they collaborated.
Yeah.
And I did not know that the I Wandered Lonely as a Cloud, the inspirational walk for that, was one that Dorothy and William took together around Ullswater in 1802.
Oh, was it?
I mean, how annoying would it be if you're on a walk with someone, it inspires a poem, and it's called I Wandered Lonely as a Cloud? It's like, well, I'm him, I was there, you know?
Like it's my sister had stopped to tie her laces. And it was her, because she wrote up the Daffodils Encounter.
Yes,
Because they
yes.
did see a load of daffodils on the walk, and then
well,
She
there's a
wrote
lot
it
of
up.
daffodils around there, Ullswater. They're all over.
and she was right. She used some very evocative language about them. They were, bouncing around and flopping about, or whatever. I can't remember. What it was. It wasn't that.
that's
It wasn't
the
that. But the waving, dancing host and all of that. That was some of that language made its way into the poem. So
Okay.
Yeah.
co-writer credit.
Well, I think they were co-writers of lyrical ballads, basically. There was this amazing kind of threesome they had, essentially. So it was Dorothy and William and Coleridge. They all lived together in Dorset for a while and Somerset, and they, like you said, Lucy, they wrote in each other's notebooks and they sort of finished each other's sentences, and Dorothy would write up this journal of how their walks and the flowers and the clouds and shit. So I think it was a collaboration, lyrical ballads, but Wordsworth wouldn't let anyone else have the copyright of it. So I think even though it's got a bunch of Coleridge in there, it's got 5 or 6 Coleridge poems in there,
Isn't Ancient Mariner
including Ancient Mariner,
which is one of you'd want
it's the
to
big
own
one.
that, really,
Yeah,
wouldn't
yeah.
you?
It's the biggie. But Wordsworth was such a genius poet, and Coleridge was all like, Wordsworth, you're the better one. You're the genius. You take this. So it was.
Well, he
originally
first
anonymous.
met, Coleridge said he was so excited that he leapt over a fence to get at Wordsworth. It's such
Yeah.
a sweet, it is like a real sort of fanboy.
It really is.
I mean, and I had only recently got to know anything about Wordsworth, and I had thought, oh, he's the daffodils and it's all very pretty, and what a life. What a life he had. Illegitimate children, revolutionary France. He was in revolutionary France, fathered a child, and then buggered off and couldn't get back to the child for like 10 years or something.
Couldn't?
Although,
I'm so sorry. Is the revolution still happening? Sorry. I just look so aristocratic that it's a bit of a risk.
Yeah, can't even send any money. Soz.
He did send money, by the way, in case his family are listening.
Yeah, he did.
He sent money. But yeah, he didn't invite them out of revolutionary France. And they were royalists, so there was probably some tension for...
interesting.
Which is very bizarre, because he was a revolutionary, at least at the start, like all cool, trendy people of the day. Obviously went to France, thought these whole ideas of equality and fraternity and liberty, I love it, sounds great. Met loads of other fellow revolutionary reformists, and then got a bit put off by all the sort of mass murder that happened.
The terror and stuff.
Yeah.
And I think he was very good friends with someone who I think he saw get executed.
Oh, bloody
and
hell.
I think that will put you off sometimes.
Well,
it was
yeah.
basically his gap year. He was 22 years old when he went. And
Yeah.
the thing about Wordsworth, he lived he lived 80 years at the time, 1770 to 1850. So it was a long old life.
Yeah.
And I think the imagination is of him was quite an old man, because he was for a while.
Depends when you define old as starting,
Well,
I suppose.
measure the wrists. Do you know one thing Wordsworth couldn't do?
Ride a motorbike.
Yep.
What couldn't he do?
It is actually the daffodils. He would not have been able
Oh, I know.
to smell them.
Yeah.
He had no sense of smell.
It's anosmic.
Early COVID.
Anosmic. Early
Patient zero.
and he had no sense of taste, as I think we can tell from the prelude. That's a joke about his big long poem. His nephew Christopher wrote his first ever biography in 1851, so the year after he died, and he wrote, "With regard to fragrance, Mr. Wordsworth spoke from the testimony of others. He himself had no sense of smell."
God, that's awful. As someone who's so infatuated with the countryside and nature and all of that, how dreadful. Although daffodils don't really smell, do they?
Yeah,
Do they?
yeah.
I don't like the smell of daffodils, actually. If we
Oh,
have them
they
in the
smell a bit
house.
like weed, don't
Yes,
they?
I didn't.
Yeah.
I didn't like to say, but
But
yes.
they do have a big old smell.
Yeah, you're right. Sorry, they smell very strongly of urine, so I've tried to blank it out.
That's probably why he wrote that. He wrote this amazing poem about daffodils, and everyone else is like, are they not the ones that smell of weed?
You say he lived to be very old, but a lot of people would say should have died younger. Should have copped it earlier, because he got quite crap later on in life, according to, I suppose, most literary critics. And even he, when he was asked to be poet laureate when he was 73, said, look, I don't think I'm good enough. I haven't written anything decent for years. And he never published anything as poet laureate, did he?
Well,
Yeah.
but when he was asked to be poet laureate, he said no at the start. But then Robert Peel said, well, the Queen really wants you to be poet laureate, and you don't have to do any work. So would you reconsider? He went, all right, fine. But he was really famous at that time, wasn't he?
Yeah.
And there's a bit where his wife was writing about when he was 77 years old. She's writing a letter to someone, and in the letter she says, I'm looking up and a group of young tourists are standing before the window. And so they're just people looking in his window and just going, oh, look, there he is. And apparently he was reading the newspaper, and every time he lifted his head from the newspaper, all the tourists would bow to him.
Oh,
Isn't that amazing?
I think that would put you off your work. That's why.
And your newspaper.
Right.
Try doing a Sudoku under those circumstances. That's incredible.
But he also always wore shades as well when he got older.
Seriously?
Yeah, because
Cool.
he had very inflamed eyes, and so he wore dark glasses to stop the light from getting in.
Blimey, couldn't smell and then couldn't see anything because of his shades.
Yeah.
Eventually he would have been an entirely tactile-based poet. Yeah.
He got quite reactionary as well. He did the old classic, "This is why better to die young." He went from being cool, revolutionary, reformist, and thinking things like he was sort of he was essential to the founding of the National Trust, because he really believed in land being shared by everyone. Everyone should have access and should get outside and experience nature. The working classes should be, it should be brought up to the Lake District and shown how lovely the rivers are or whatever.
How come I went to a National Trust property the other day and it was 4:00 on a Sunday day and they said, sorry, we're closed.
Yeah, sorry about that. They're not staying true to the spirit of Wordsworth. But, well, he went off the idea anyway in his later life because he became very pro the death penalty, wrote poems in favour of the death penalty, just to make sure people knew where he stood.
There must be so few poems in favour of the death penalty. It feels like a weird crossover, doesn't it?
Yeah, a death penalty fan and a poet. You don't see them often in one person.
What was it called? Do you know?
Yes, it was called...
Off with their heads.
Noose on the loose.
It was called Sonnets Upon the Punishment of Death.
Wow.
Crumbs.
And he didn't like it, actually, it turned out, when the trains got up and running and people did start getting the train up to the Lake District from sort of Manchester and stuff and disturbing his peace and quietude.
Wow.
Turned into a miserable old goat. Really.
I suppose if people were standing outside your window, you'd be like, well, I don't want more of them coming up to stand and look at me while I read the paper. And
fair enough.
I think the death penalty for people who stare.
Nice.
I think staring.
You drop a guillotine from your window.
God, Porter's Britain is going to be a pretty intense place.
You thought Priti Patel was hardcore, I tell you.
You looking at me?
There'll be quiz shows about me on television. That's the main thing that I'm looking for.
Stop the podcast.
Stop the podcast.
Hi everyone, we'd like to let you know that we are sponsored this week by ExpressVPN. Now, Anna, do you know that watching Netflix without using ExpressVPN is like buying tickets to a Name Your Favourite Singer concert, but only being able to watch the opening act? I didn't really know what singer to put for myself. I suppose for you it would be The Weeknd.
Oh, The Weeknd. All this Taylor Swift character I hear, he's very good as well. But our point is that if you get ExpressVPN, it'll give you access to the whole of Netflix from around the world or various other streaming services. So it makes your IP address look like it's in a different country. So you can toggle to whatever country you want to be in.
Absolutely. And they have really, really fast speeds, so you can stream in HD with no buffering. So you could say that you can tailor your online content and you can do it very swiftly. Anyway,
I see what you've done there.
So expressvpn.com/fish is the place to go. And if you go there, you will get an extra 3 months of ExpressVPN for free.
That's right. So get an extra 3 months for free when you sign up by going to expressvpn.com/fish. Okay, on with the show.
On with the podcast.
Okay, it's time for our final fact of the show, and that is James.
Okay, my fact this week is that we know of 5 people who have died in the Queen Vic in EastEnders, although one of them was murdered 120 years before the TV show began.
That's a prequel, isn't it?
Yeah.
Wasn't it they were stabbed to death for staring at local bard William Wordsworth?
That's true, because Lucy has been in EastEnders, right?
I have very
So,
recently,
yeah.
yes.
Gosh, if anyone
What
stared
did
at
you
you.
play?
Didn't get murdered in the Queen Vic. So I had a very small part as a woman called Rita, who was the love interest of a character called Mitch. So for our overseas listeners, EastEnders is a beloved soap opera. And if you get a part in EastEnders, it is absolutely mandatory for everyone you know to then talk at you in a Cockney accent for, all right, you in EastEnders, or you're not my mother. And
You slag!
is my name above the door, Frank? So yeah, but I didn't get to go inside the Queen Vic, so
did you
maybe
not?
I was lucky, given that it's obviously
Were all of
such
your
a hotbed of murder.
all of your scenes outdoors?
No, I was in the Laundrette, which is another
it's
sort
another
of absolutely
classic
iconic
venue.
location. But I don't know if I've been killed off, because they don't tell you. Obviously, when you go into EastEnders, they're not allowed to tell you anything about what's going on. And especially when I was in it, there was a big murder storyline which has now been resolved, but they bumped up their murder count because there was a man called Gray who was murdering loads of people. And so I got the script, and they were like, well, you can't tell anyone what happens, because not my bit was like the little comic relief nonsense, but this big storyline was being resolved. And in fact, when I got onto the set, I was in the laundrette, and this murderer came in, and it was his last day, and I was like, oh, because he was the most hated man in Britain, and he came in, and it was his last day, so he did this lovely speech about how wonderful it is, and I've had such a wonderful time, and it was like seeing, I don't know, Fred West or Ted Bundy. So, well, it's all been a marvellous lark, and
Wow, that's amazing.
That was that in the last 4 or 5 years then?
that was in the last year. So because I know EastEnders wasn't very murdery for a while. It was always Coronation Street, I think, was the most murdery, and then Hollyoaks.
Really?
Hollyoaks took over. It was the hotbed of murder.
I've got a friend who's in Hollyoaks, and during COVID, she had to do some kissing scenes, but she couldn't do it because obviously you weren't allowed to go near, and so her partner had to come on and be her love interest, but you only kind of saw his shoulder the whole time. He's a singer in a band, he's got long hair, very skinny guy, and her partner was this kind of hunky Asian bloke. That was an amazing bit of camera work to make sure.
Wow.
Yeah, what a needle to thread. Well, they've both got shoulders, haven't they? So she just kisses him once on the shoulder. That should be fine.
Well, even when I was filming, it was like you had to stand and shout across the laundrette at each other. But that's fine, because you shout all the time in EastEnders anyway. So it was
And in
absolutely
laundrettes, it's a noisy working environment.
Yes.
Yes.
So,
Did you have to do the tennis ball on a stick thing?
what's that?
In EastEnders during COVID, I watched a sort of little documentary on all the tricks they had to do, and one of them was whenever you see anyone in a close-up scene with someone else in EastEnders during COVID, they were talking to an empty space, but they would put a little tennis ball at the top of a pole, which was where you were supposed to look to see their eyes. So if they're sobbing or laughing or chatting, it's always engaging with a tennis ball.
For
on a
those
stick.
two-person shots where you see their face, but the other person's back of their head.
the reverse.
Yeah. Well, they did it in plates. So they did it, they'd film one person, a bit like how they did The Parent Trap.
Oh, right.
I mean, they could have used it to make someone their own twin for a while. If you're going to do it that
They might
way,
as
then
well.
you know.
Yeah.
They could have done like, is it Eddie Murphy in that movie?
Nutty Professor to the Clumps.
Yeah. Could have done everything. Or in Kind Hearts and Coronets would probably be a better version. Yeah.
Everyone's Phil Mitchell. Phil Mitchell. They should have had a completely Phil Mitchell episode of EastEnders where he played all the roles.
Yeah.
That would be good.
I haven't really explained the fact, have I?
No, sorry. The
I
Queen
should
Vic pub.
very, very quickly.
Yeah.
They in February 2020, one character called Sharon Mitchell decided to tell a story.
The tentativeness with which you said one of the seminal EastEnders characters' names.
Is that sorry?
She's one of the 5 biggest characters in it. She's
Sharon!
since the start.
I'm so
Letitia
sorry.
Dean. I mean, she's a brilliant.
Oh,
actor.
is it?
Yeah.
Well,
Letitia Dean's
by
great.
my accent, you could probably tell I'm a Coronation Street guy.
Fair enough.
But anyway, so Sharon Mitchell talked about Mr. and Mrs. Bagstock, who were the original landlord and landlady of the Queen Vic. And apparently, back in the 1860s, when the fictional Queen Vic was first built, this landlord killed his landlady by drowning her in the bath. And maybe that's why they've had so much bad luck in Albert Square since then.
It's a haunted pub, effectively.
Yeah, I tried to see if there was a such person as Mr. Bagstock in London, but Bagstock doesn't appear to even be a name. I think it's in Dombey and Sons, but I think it's just a made-up Dickens name.
God, that's a nice literary pedigree, though, for this random bit of Queen Vic trivia.
Yeah.
That's great. So one thing that EastEnders has in common with William Wordsworth,
Oh yeah,
They can't smell.
they can't.
Nobody can smell.
Yeah,
pro death penalty.
daffodils.
Oh,
So there are some daffodils in Albert Square, but Wordsworth wouldn't have been able to smell these ones for a very good reason, which is that they're fake. And the reason that they're fake daffodils, I'm probably good filming reasons for that, but also they film, is it about 6 weeks in advance? You film the episodes about 6 weeks later, so they make it look like spring, even though it's still winter, right? So that's their way of doing it. It's basically a time portal. And then at the other end of the year, they have to shave the trees. No, I'm joking. That's not real.
because I was thinking the very first lines of the first episode of EastEnders was Dirty Den walks in and he goes, "Stinks in here."
Oh, yeah.
So it might have been sticks of wheat in here from all those daffodils.
That are definitely real.
Dirty daff.
Well, didn't he get killed by someone was holding a bunch of flowers?
Oh, did?
The
Yeah,
first time. He wasn't actually dead.
Yeah.
But someone was
he got
holding a bunch
shot,
of
did he?
daffodils and they shot him through it. So,
God, I love it. It's all tying together.
my
Yeah.
God. It's like it's David Lynch, isn't it? It's extraordinary.
We've broken EastEnders wide open. So the person behind EastEnders was a woman called Julia Smith, who, when she was advertising for jobs, said only EastEnders need apply. So it was all real people from the East End of London at first who were on it, and they weren't actually calling it EastEnders at the time. They were calling it East 8. And she wrote that they called it East 8, referred to it as East 8 when they were working on the show before it came out. And then she realised a bunch of her friends were saying, "What's this estate programme you've got? When's that coming out?" And it's the word estate. But it could have been called other working titles: Square Dance, or Round the Houses, which isn't that another show?
That's quite a good title.
Round the Houses. It sounds like a much more huggable. I think there are fewer murders in Round the Houses.
Yeah, that's the
right,
lovable
right.
70s sitcom, isn't
Yeah.
it? That's the Terry and June style.
Yeah.
Oh, Reg Cox is fine. He was just pretending.
It's a prank.
On the subject of the script security, because you know it's set in Walford, right? So this was the fictional place they've created. So when my husband was in EastEnders a few years ago, and it was Christmas Day episode, which again, you know, they don't want anything to get out about the Christmas Day episode. So they have this ridiculous procedure where they send you a script, but they won't send the password to unlock that script to the same email that they've sent the script to, because obviously that might get hacked. So what they do then is they phone you, and then they give you another special code which sort of unlocks something else. Anyway, it's like a 7-stage. It'd be easier to get the nuclear codes than to get into an EastEnders script. But what really made me laugh when my husband did it was that they went through all of this, and he had to be by the phone at a certain time, take the phone call, and he answered the phone, went and then started typing it in, and the password was Walford, which was like, and then since I did it recently, and they have changed it because I told everyone I knew about that.
But the A was a 4, wasn't it? So no one knew.
Yeah, impenetrable levels.
Wow.
Walford probably named after Walford Road, which is in Dalston, because one of the other co-creator with Julia Smith was Tony Holland, and he lived in Dalston or nearby, and he probably saw Walford Road and gave it that name. He based Albert Square on a place called Facet Square in Dalston, which I went to yesterday, had a cycle round. Very nice. And the nearest pub to Facet Square is called the Victoria, which I'm fairly certain must be where he got the idea for the Queen Vic name, at least, because it's got its license in 1848, so it's a very, very old pub. Anyway, I went there last night, and
You murdered someone.
I was hoping...
You discovered you were your own father, and the whole place burnt down.
I was so hoping for that kind of thing, but basically it's the hipsteriest place you can possibly imagine. Instead of like light fixtures, it has upside down plant pots with trees coming out of it, and it sells 4 different types of kombucha. But it's really,
That's
I had a
great
nice
primary research.
pint of IPA and read my book.
Dot Cotton
Well-
wouldn't have approved of all of this, would she?
I mean, everybody does complain about the fact that EastEnders is now set in an area of London where nobody who's in it could afford to live.
Yeah.
You know, it would all be merchant bankers and hedge fund managers.
Or podcasters.
Your podcast is doing well, trust me, not most podcasters. But yeah, but Ofcom, I was reading all the Ofcom complaints about EastEnders, and one complaint was people saying that people spend too much time in the cafe. Someone had calculated how much the characters would spend if they were buying the amount of drinks and snacks, because of course they're always eating and drinking.
Yeah, but have you seen how many times Peggy Mitchell said, "It's on the ass, it's on the ass"?
That's true.
that's
That pub
true.
would have gone under with it.
Yeah.
Very good
They're
point.
almost all
Dave.
free drinks.
I was reading some of the other complaints actually, and there was one saying that people were throwing the cigarette butts on the ground, and if they did that, why did they not get a fixed penalty notice for doing it?
You can be having an affair with your brother's sister's cat, but yeah.
But the unrealistic thing
Yeah.
is... something else realistic is Barbara Windsor's life. I always felt that her life was quite true to what seems like a very unrealistic EastEnders life. So she was quite in the gang world, really.
Yeah.
Back in
The
the
Krays,
70s, 80s. She went out with Ronnie Cray. Hold on, who was the not mad one? She went out with Reggie Cray. Ronnie was the really mad one, wasn't he?
I mean, it's like the Williams sisters. They're both good at tennis.
She went out with the equivalent of Venus Williams, I suppose,
Okay.
in Cray Brothers mentality. And she was married. She was married to another guy called Ronnie Knight, who was another gangster.
He's really the Venus Williams of the underworld. Is that what we're saying? That's amazing.
He'd have been so flattered.
I think they'd both be flattered by that.
Incredible.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, please give your applause to the Ronnie Cray of tennis.
So she married a Ronnie Knight, who was another kind of gangster. And Ronnie Knight's brother, I ended up reading his Wikipedia page, basically. His brother's killer, and the man who killed his brother's killer were all murdered. That's a trail of 4 murders.
Sorry.
So Ronnie Knight, Barbara Windsor's husband, was his brother was murdered,
Okay.
and then his brother's killer was murdered, and then his brother's killer's killer was murdered. It's an endless trail of murder. And
I'm still picturing it in the world of tennis, and it's becoming. I mean, in the world of gangsters, it's not as implausible.
we're still in the group stages
Yeah.
of murdering, and it's
yeah,
siphoned
exactly.
down.
So.
And did Barbara Windsor kill all of those men?
Turns
That's what I
out,
was
yes.
saying. Wow.
Well, actually, her husband Ronnie Knight probably did kill his brother's killer because he admitted to it in his
Crikey.
autobiography later. But he'd already been tried for it and exonerated, so under double jeopardy, they couldn't get him in your face.
Well, there is a thing about... So, Lucy, you said about the murder stats are way higher in EastEnders. I think... So in EastEnders, it's about 100... You're about 100 times as likely to be murdered in EastEnders as you are in Britain. Mm-hmm. But there's a concomitant bit of good news, which is that residents of Walford are much more romantically faithful than real people.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Hang on, both of these things are only good news and bad news if you live in the world of EastEnders,
They
not
are.
in the real world.
Yeah, it's bad news for all of us.
Except me.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I just need to move in full time.
So on the show, it's a tiny percentage, 2% of female and 1.7% of male characters have an affair each year.
Is that right? I always thought they were all having affairs in EastEnders.
Me too. I would have thought. So this is a study from 2003. So maybe they've sexed it up since then. But that's way lower than the stats from 2003 for men and women in the UK having affairs. Also, this was the other finding: the men of Albert Square are also less likely to visit a prostitute. Just that's good. Just 0.18% of them are knocking on that door.
Good on them.
Yeah.
Well, again, you see, I should be suggesting this to the storyliners. I should say become a sex worker, make the show more realistic. I could be the man trap of Walford.
Okay, that's it. That's all of our facts. Thank you so much for listening. If you would like to get in touch with any of us about the things that we've said on the course of this show, we can all be found on our Twitter accounts. I'm on @AndrewHunterM, James,
@James Harkin,
Lucy,
Lucy Porter comic.
and Anna.
You can email podcast@qi.com.
Or you can go to our group account, which is @NoSuchThing. If you want to go to our website, which is nosuchthingasafish.com, we have all of our previous episodes there and lots of merch, live shows. We're coming to Scotland and Wales quite soon. There's all sorts of other stuff there. So go and check it out if you like. And you should also check out Lucy's podcast. It's Fingers on Buzzers. She hosts it with previous fish guest Jenny Ryan. So you're getting 2 fish graduates for the price of none. Fingers on Buzzers. Check it out wherever you get your podcasts from. And we'll be back again next week with another episode of the podcast. We'll see you then. Goodbye.